Alright, this is a video that's long overdue. I was supposed to do this video months ago. I wanted to do it. I had the notes. I'm just not getting to it. So this is a review of Steve Bannon's Faces of Evil and Zero Generation. And I'll put that in the description link. It's 2 YouTube videos. And the third one, The Torchbearer, I haven't been able to watch that yet. But as you know, Bannon is Trump's chief political strategist. So I like to believe if you, without ever meeting someone, if you view their movie collection and their music collection, you'll kind of basically know what kind of person they are in a way. So he directed these 2 movies, In the Faces of Evil and Generation Zero. And we're going to talk about that. And what I feel is the whole point of this is the striking similarities between Reagan and Trump. And that's not really being talked about. And I feel Trump is kind of going off a blueprint, especially if Bannon is his strategist. And also, Bannon, even though he was demoted, he still has the position. So, as the chief strategist. So, I'm just going to go over my notes. So the first movie, In the Faces of Evil, is basically about Ronald Reagan and how he basically rose a little bit through the cracks and became, president. And it mostly focuses on the 80s. It doesn't really focus. It talks briefly about him being an actor and governor or whatever, different things like that. But talks about the 80s, his presidency, and the Soviet Union conflict, or Russia, which is similar right there to Trump. So, off the bat, this, and you can research this isn't really in the movie, but it's in the movie, but it isn't expounded on as much as I would have liked. That Reagan cut a lot of the social funding, which is what Trump is trying to do. It's the exact, he cut social funding and he increased military spending, military defense. And I mean, that right there should be enough to tell you, but the movie makes a point. And these movies are, I think, In the Faces of Evil came out 2004. Reagan wants to protect the country. That was his primary obligation. He wanted to protect it from communists and, different things like that. And also he added the Catholic Mass to the radio. And he wanted to reinstore the beliefs in God and religion and, different things like that. And that's very striking to me because I'll post a link in this video. When we were at the RNC, we spoke with someone who was a South Carolina delegate, and she had left the Republican Party, or she turned in her delegate as a South Carolina Republican delegate, and she didn't want to be a part of it anymore. And we interviewed her, and she basically said that they looked at Trump as it was ordained by God. They kept mentioning there was a lot of religious overtones to this. So the fact that Reagan put the Catholic Mass back into the public radio, try and restore religious Catholic values, and also once Reagan was shot and he lived, it became because it talks about this in the movie, once he was shot, it became like, oh, it must be God's will, that whole thing again. So those 2 things are very important. Reagan wanted to tear down the Berlin Wall. Trump wants to build the wall in, Mexico. Reagan was in Hollywood just like Trump also, of course. So that right there, they're both actors. So that's pretty. I think it's worth watching at least one time to give you. It's good to give you a historical reference and what, because you know the cliche history repeats itself. It's good to get a historical reference to see, you know, what the Trump administration may be going off of. What is their blueprint? What are they trying to restore? Because these two documentaries and even the third one, from what I understand, they're trying to restore the old traditional American values. And I'm not completely against that, but the next movie, that's pretty much it. I think people should watch it. I think it'll save a lot of time as far as people being distracted, seeing Trump in the news every day, and you'll get kind of numb to it. But if you think like, okay, they're trying to distract me with all the Trump stuff, but I know what he's doing, or I know his plan, I know his agenda, I know who he is getting it from, I know who's influencing him. I think this is very important because we need to learn what's coming, why is it coming, and what's to come for the next 4 years. I mean, we're barely 90 days in, 100 days in. So the Generation Zero documentary is basically, in a nutshell, Bannon, and there's a lot of other people in the movie, but they're basically, I feel like they're blaming the hippies for why the country is in the state it's in today. They're saying that in the 50s and 60s, you know, the baby boomers, they were working, family structure, they worked the jobs, they had fought in some of the wars, World War II, had a whole bunch of babies. That's why they're the baby boomers. People died, you know. So the next generation in the 60s and late 50s, that might be a spiritual thing to balance out all the wars. They wanted to become hippies. They were more liberal. And they're saying that they weren't basically contributing to society. They weren't working. And they could be hippies for 20, 25 years and then go and get a job or go and become some executive, you know, later in life. But they're saying, I guess, that gap between deciding to be a hippie then actually working decades later, it left a void in the society. So as crazy as it sounds, I see where they're coming from, but they didn't really put any liability on the government structure as well. Because I think, you know, and they briefly mentioned that the black community and the hippies were being targeted. So I would say that was the only thing that was kind of mentioned as far as, if you want to say, sympathetic. But there was a little talk of lazy or blacks not working. And then, you know, the conservatives have the whole lace yourself up by the bootstrap mentality, work hard, I got a job, I paid myself through this and that. They don't really acknowledge that there's a certain maybe invisible barrier or a racial barrier that, you know, no matter how hard you work, no matter how many jobs you have, it's not going to be good enough. Because, and I say this a lot, it's interesting in a society where they say it's not what you know, it's who you know. And the people who you're supposed to know are usually white and at the top. So if you want to be independent and do things on your own, it's going to be a lot difficult. That's why I don't want to get too off topic. So the Zero Generation documentary, Steve Bannon viewed it as lazy people who wanted to have fun and not take responsibilities, hippies seeking eternal peace. 1950s are misunderstood, view 60s as moral self-righteousness. flaunt sexuality. Boy grows hair long and becomes hippies, wallow in narcissism. I mean, a lot of this is going on today, if we're going to be honest. Hippies thought they were the first generation to have a moral compass to tell adults how to lead their lives. So it's interesting. You kind of, especially with social media, I think there's a resurgence of this. So I think this is a very, if you watch this with the open mind and you're not far right or far left, I think you'll kind of see that there is some validity to what is being said here. At least as far as the relevancy between the 50s and 60s and now. The only way to change an evil society is to bankrupt that society. Columbia University professors Howard and Piven crisis strategy to destroy, these were the rules for radicals. To bankrupt capitalism, to destroy capitalism. Once you have a bankrupt society, it is then ready for revolution. Created, it exceeds demands for regulations, entitlement. Disruption from the outside and inside is far more important, especially from the inside. So they're saying that this is what the hippies and stuff, this is why they were lazy and didn't work, because they wanted to bankrupt capitalism and society and have it rebuilt. They said basically that was the only way that it could be done. So, society is a contract between the dead and the living and those yet to be born. We turned our belief from God. See, there's, from the first video they were talking a lot about God, and it goes on into this video. We turned our belief from God to individualism. It's all about me, and my desires. Forgotten work ethic, virtues in an unraveling society becomes to self-centered. So I kind of agree with that, but that's what, in a way, capitalism kind of creates. It creates a me society. Other cultures and people from different ethnic backgrounds, they tend to work together. You know, if you have more of a community and you come from that, you're going to practice group economics and not really focus on individualism as much as we would. So I think there's some truth to that. Strong sense of accountability. Bill Clinton bailed out Wall Street. What happens when people are not held accountable for their actions? So this is where they're kind of putting the blame on, even though he's a Democrat, but they said he bailed out Wall Street. He's saying we should hold Wall Street accountable. Blame political leaders are looking out for the bankers. Americans consume about 5% more than they produce, which is why they're in debt. And I can understand that, and that's why I agree with a lot of this film and the other film, is that as the black community, we can take from this is we have to get back to producing, and which we are in a way, but we have to get more focused and more set on producing and establishing our own industries. And here it is, black victimization. Whites have been in a position where they have to say they are not racist, white guilt. So obviously I disagree with that. So some more of the similarities between Trump and Reagan. Reagan was dismissed as a serious candidate, and so was Trump. Like Reagan, Trump is a Washington outsider. Both former Hollywood stars, I already mentioned that. Trump and Reagan were attacked by the establishment as being extreme and simplistic. Trump shares Reagan's passion for what he believes in. Trump espouses similar views as Reagan on illegal immigration. Reagan signed the Immigration Reform and Control Act in 1986, making it illegal to knowingly hire or recruit illegal immigrants and requiring employees to attest to their employees' immigration status. Requiring employers to attest to their employees' immigration status. Trump is a straight talker like Reagan. He doesn't hide behind political correctness. Reagan was dubbed the great communicator. Trump began as a Democrat before becoming Republican. Reagan, too, was a liberal Democrat, but he went to register as a Republican in 1964. So both shares the views on wanting to make America great again. Trump favors tax reduction, as did Reagan. The reduction in tax rates championed by Reaganomics sought to spur economic growth. Trump has called for a repeal of the estate tax, the lowering of taxes on capital gains and dividends, and reducing the corporate tax rate to 0 to spur job growth. Trump, like Reagan, is pro-life. Trump and Reagan both defend the Second Amendment and gun rights. And Reagan was the first president to be divorced. So, Trump has several baby mothers, and he was married. So, let me know what you think. What can we learn? What do you feel we can learn? I think, me personally, if we look at what Reagan did, and because Reagan, especially with all this CIA and Russia stuff, Reagan, that was what he was known for, was dealing with Russia, trying to cool things out in a way, but he spent a big budget he cut social programs and increased the budget significantly on military spending. So, to me, the similarities is too great to ignore, if you ask me. And like I said, we look at how Reagan handled things. It might not be exactly how Trump might handle things, but I think that similarity will definitely be there. Basically, I think the basics are protecting America, military spending, and cutting social reform. I think those are, and that's what, people are paying attention to it, but, I just feel like we can learn by, just watch those movies too. Those movies is you see a lot of similarities between the 50s and 60s and today. I think there's a lot of similarities, and I agree with, like I said earlier, the restoration of American values in a way. Yes, I understand the racist history, but as far as the Ford plants and they're homegrown, made in America, we have to kind of get that mentality, I feel, because as I do the videos on the creative class and the globalization, different things like that, that is not creating a stable economy, but making things in America will. And like I said, we consume more than we produce. We consume 5% more than we produce. So if we make things here in America, we'll be producing more. So let me know what you think on the video. All right.